Hey guys, so today I'm going to be showing you guys how to make this dress. So basically the story behind why I wanted to make this is because my mom actually has this dress, which I've always been obsessed with. It's definitely from like the 90s or maybe even older. It's vintage, but unfortunately it's always just been way too small for me. And what I really love about this dress in particular is this like front tie detailing with the slight ruching on the top. I just think it's so beautiful and like sort of, I guess, like a Milkmaid kind of style dress, but like kind of like a more like a tank top style. So this is basically the inspiration behind it. So I thought it'd be really fun if I could recreate it, and last week actually I picked up this fabric from Value Village for only like $3, and I thought it would make the cutest dress. So that is basically the backstory, and that is the dress that we're going to be making today. Okay, so first things first, we need to start with measurements. You guys know the drill. I have everything nicely labeled. So the first thing you want to measure is going to be called measurement A, and that is going to be the measurement from your upper strap to your other upper strap. The next measurement you want to measure is measurement B, and that's going to be directly under the bust all the way around. Then you're going to measure measurement C, and that is going to be kind of like your bust length. So basically where the top of your strap starts down right under your bust. And this is going to kind of determine how cropped this top is. So if you want it to be a little more coverage or like less coverage, just make sure you're measuring from that point. Then we're going to do measurement D. Measurement D is basically the side seam. So if you're wearing a tank top, kind of like where it ends down to the start of around the bust measurement, basically. Measurement E is going to be your waist. So just go ahead and measure around your waist. Measurement F is going to be your hips, basically. So we're going to measure around the widest part of our hips, basically around the widest part of our butt. And then lastly, measurement G is basically going to be how long you want the dress to be. So this can basically really be whatever you want, but we want to make sure we're starting the measurement from directly under the bust and downwards. Now, I would highly recommend to just make the dress a lot longer than you think you're gonna want it to be, because that way we'll just have a lot more room later to hem it and decide how long we actually want it to be. Because we can always take away, we can't add fabric, so just keep that in mind. So once you've got your measurements, we can start to create the patterns. And guys, I got you this time. I know my last video was a little bit complicated with the math, and maybe that deterred some people from making this, but I made it super easy for you guys. And I basically created a Google spreadsheet where all you have to do is input your measurements, and it automatically will do all the calculations for you to tell you the exact dimensions of what your patterns are going to be, including a 1/2 inch seam allowance. So you don't need to add any seam allowance. Everything is going to be like perfectly measured out. So we are going to start creating the first pattern. It's going to be the front top section of the dress. So using the Google spreadsheet, all you're going to do is start by drawing line number 1 at the top. Once that's drawn, you're going to find the center point of that line, and you're going to go ahead and draw line number 2. Remember, all these lines are labeled very clearly in the spreadsheet, so all you have to do is go and find where it says line 1, and that will be your measurement. So once you're done drawing line 2, you can go ahead, once again making sure it's in the center of that line, you're going to draw a horizontal line number 3. And then lastly, starting on the end of line number 3, we're going to draw upwards, and that's going to be line number 4. So once that's drawn, you can go ahead, draw it on the other side, and then just go ahead and connect the missing lines. And that is basically going to be the pattern for our top. Now, moving on to the front skirt. So we're going to start by drawing a horizontal line for line number 5. This is going to be the upper part of the skirt here. And I didn't really include myself drawing this part, but to determine where the other line goes, we're going to basically draw a line. This is going to be line number 6. Then where line 6 finishes, that's where you're going to draw line number 7. And then once those lines are drawn, we can just go ahead, connect the side lines once again, just to shape our dress. And then the last pattern we're going to create is going to be for the back of the skirt. It is only going to be 1/2 that we are going to turn into like 2 different panels. So we're going to start on the bottom this time. We're going to draw line number 8. And then keeping that same distance as line number 6 from the last pattern, we're gonna go ahead and draw line number 9, which is gonna be on the top. So then from the end of line 9, we're gonna draw upwards and draw line number 10. Once those are done, we can go ahead and finish drawing the rest of the lines. So at this point, this may look very familiar to the last pieces we drew because they are basically very similar, but this is where we're going to change it up a bit. So now we want to find the center points of line 9 and 8, so basically the exact center of our pattern, and we're going to create a little mark where that is. So once we have our center points marked, we're actually going to move and jump over about 4 inches to the right and create a little mark there. You may notice that I only do 2 inches and actually go back and fix this later, but you definitely want to do 4 just to ensure there's enough fabric. So once we have our little marks from 4 inches, we can then just connect those lines. And once that's all drawn out, we can basically go ahead and cut out our pattern. So you should basically end up having 3 different pieces, one for the top front, the front skirt, and then 1 piece for the back skirt. We will actually be cutting out 2 versions of the back skirt. Just make sure for one of them you are flipping the pattern over so that it is going to be different. And you may notice at this point that the front top is wider than the front of the skirt, but don't worry about that because we are going to be ruching it in later, so it'll all line up. Okay guys, before we move on from this part, I would just encourage you guys to take each pattern, hold it up on your body and mark about where your hips are, and then line the pattern flat. I would just quickly measure the width of each of your pieces, making sure to add the width of the front and both of the back pieces. And I just make sure this part still ends up being wider than your hips because we do want to have like a little bit of room in the dress, and we also want to make sure there's room for the zipper. So if you add up all the widths and it just matches your hip, or it's even smaller, then I would just go ahead back to our last step and add a few more inches because we do want to make sure that this dress does end up fitting in the end. So once all those main big pieces are done, we do want to create the little tiny front tie details. So once again, we're going to go back and refer to our spreadsheet, and at the bottom you should notice that it already has created the dimensions for you. So you're going to end up cutting out 2 rectangles for the tube and 2 rectangles for the ties. So at this point we should have all the pieces of the dress except for the actual straps, but we are going to worry about that later. So first things first, we're going to work on our little tube pieces. So they're going to be like the more shorter, stubby rectangles. So starting off, we're just going to take one of each end and fold it onto itself, just so it creates a nice little clean edge. And we're just gonna go ahead and quickly run that through the sewing machine. So once we have our clean edges, we're just gonna place each tube on either side of the top of the front skirt, making sure that, you know, the sides line up on the edges. And then we're just gonna fold our tubes in half and pin them to the skirt. And don't mind my little paper thing. I was just using that as like a weight so the dress wouldn't slip off. So then once our tubes are pinned down, all we have to do is just go ahead and sew a line right on top so that our tubes are fully attached to the front skirt. So now we have some nice clean little tubes. So next we actually want to attach the front top of the dress to the front skirt. We're going to go ahead and lie the front top on top, making sure good sides are facing together. And we're actually gonna start first on the left and right sides and pin them down. And once that's done, you may notice that there's a ton of extra fabric in the center, and that's okay because that is what is gonna be used to create our ruching detail. So basically what we're gonna do is just create tiny little folds and pin them into place. So that's what's going to give it the pleated effect. So in my opinion, the more pleats there are and the smaller the pleats, the better it's probably going to look. So just do as many as you can. I ended up only being able to do 3 on each side, but that seemed to be enough. Once you flip it over, you can already see the ruching detail already starting to form, and the top and skirt should now line up perfectly and be exactly the same length. So once again, all we have to do is just go ahead and sew those pieces together. And you know, the front of our dress is already starting to come together pretty nicely. But next we do want to create the actual ties. I know a few people, including myself, had a lot of trouble flipping our straps inside out for my last DIY project. And because these straps are so thin, I knew that there was no way that we were gonna be able to flip them inside out. So I kind of came up with a new method that will hopefully be a little bit easier. So we're gonna start by folding our strips into quarters. So taking one side and meeting it about halfway in the middle and folding it down. And I would definitely recommend using an iron for this part. It's gonna make everything way easier, and it's actually gonna hold your folds into place. But basically I just started ironing one side down and then the other so that the two sides would meet in the middle. Once those sides were folded, I just went ahead and folded one more time in the center so that we had our perfectly clean tie and no raw edges are sticking out. Then once you have your ties nicely folded and ironed down, you can just quickly run them through the sewing machine and do a top stitch so that they stay in place. And then once you're done, you'll have these nice clean ties, no flipping inside out necessary. So once we have our straps, we're gonna need to actually feed them into the actual tube. So I just went ahead and took a safety pin and pinned it to one side of the strap and just started feeding it into the tube so that it came out the other end. And then I just did the same thing to the other side. You're kind of like inching it along, kind of like, you know, when like the string of your hoodie comes out and you have to like put it back in, basically the same concept. So once it was out, I just kind of secured the safety pin to the other side of the dress, so just so that it wouldn't accidentally slide back out. So now we're actually gonna wanna start attaching the back pieces. So we're gonna take the front of our dress and lay one of the back pieces on top, making sure the good sides are facing and making sure that the sides all line up. So then I'm just gonna go ahead and pin those pieces together. When you're pinning, you just wanna make sure that our little strap with the safety pin is sticking out on the outside so that it does get trapped in the seam once we sew. So once secured, we're just gonna sew a straight stitch down the sides to conjoin those pieces. And of course, we're just gonna repeat that with the other back piece. So once our back pieces are attached, it's actually time to install the zipper. So I just picked up my zipper from Walmart. I kind of just tried to find one that would best match the colors, just so it would be like a little bit more hidden. You do want to make sure it's long enough so that it does go past your hips, because that is going to be the widest part of your body that you need to fit the dress on. So I think mine ended up being about like 40 centimeters, I can't remember. So that should be good unless you're like super tall or something. So start by laying the zipper onto the fabric, kind of in the spot that it will eventually be, you know, facing upwards. But then we're actually going to flip it over and attach it directly onto the back of the dress. Then I went ahead and just pinned it directly onto the good side of the dress. Once that's pinned, all we have to do is just go ahead and sew the zipper down in place. We want to get as close to the zipper teeth as possible, but obviously you don't want to sew onto the actual zipper. So as you can see, the zipper is nice and attached on the right side of the dress. So now we're going to do the left side. And in order to do that, we're going to open our dress so that we're now looking on the inside of the dress, and we're actually just going to create a small fold on that side. We're going to place the zipper right on top, making sure those teeth are facing outward. You kind of want to make sure the fold underneath is almost like sticking out a little bit past the actual zipper, because this is going to be what's going to help hide it later. So we're just going to go ahead once again and pin everything down, and we can just go ahead and sew everything in place. And once that's done, we should have a perfectly working, clean, kind of like hidden zipper. So now all we have to do is just connect the rest of the bottom of the dress where the zipper ended, because that part's still open. So all I'm doing here is just pinning the two sides of the dress together. Very, very simple. And we can just easily go ahead and sew that together. So now at this point, you should definitely try on the dress, and you may notice that the back is pretty loose. So what we're gonna need to do is actually create darts to kind of like cinch in the back and make sure it fits properly. So you'll definitely have to play around with the size of the darts. You'll definitely have to like probably want to try it on the dress a few times just to get it right. So what you're going to want to do is, starting from the top of the dress, is you just want to take a piece of your fabric and fold it in and pin it in place. And then basically what you're going to want to do is kind of taper it outwards to your desired length until basically the pleat gets smaller and smaller until there's actually no fold in the fabric at all. It'll basically look like a giant triangle. So I went ahead, chose the top and bottom portions of my darts and pinned it into place. I also made sure to measure the distance from my zipper to my dart on either side, because you definitely want it to be even just so it looks proper. So now all we have to do is take that fold and sew along the line. So as always, I just quickly ran that through my sewing machine and just did a straight stitch all the way to the bottom of my dart. So at this point, the dress should fit you pretty well because all that's left to do is pretty much just the final touches. So now we're basically going to be creating the trim and the straps for the dress. So firstly, what we want to do is take our dress and measure from where the zipper starts along the edge right up to where the strap would start basically. Now for this particular dress, the trim actually turns into the strap. So we also want to figure out what our strap length is. So you can either measure this on or off of you, but I just took that same tank top I was wearing earlier and I basically just quickly measured how long the strap is. So you're going to take that measurement, combine it with the measurement of what's going to be your trim, and that'll basically give you the total length you're going to need for this strap slash trim piece. But of course I would just add, you know, a couple extra inches just to give you some wiggle room, just in case so that you can make it like a little tighter or looser, depending on how you want it to fit. So taking that length that we just measured, we are going to create 2 strips that are 2 inches wide. And we also still need to create the trim for the upper part of the dress since it's not attached to the straps at all. So we're going to be creating that as well. This should end up being the exact measurement of measurement A that we did earlier. So we're going to do measurement A as the length, and then we're going to make it 2 inches wide. So we should end up having 3 more pieces, 2 long ones for the straps, and then 1 for the front trim. So we're going to be using the exact same method that we did to create the ties, where we do kind of like a double fold. Now, I believe this is also referred to as bias tape, which you can actually just go to the store and buy if you want. That would definitely save you a little bit extra time. I know this part can be a little bit tedious, but because I did want my trim to be the exact same print as my actual dress, that's the reason why I decided to make my own. So you should end up with 3 nice, clean little strap pieces, but we don't want to sew them yet. I just went ahead and pinned them down just so that they wouldn't start to unfold on me. So we're going to start with our little front trim piece, and we're basically going to use the same method with how we gathered the bottom of our front piece. We're going to start by pinning the right and left sides of the trim into place, making sure that we're really like sandwiching our fabric in between the trim. And once again, we're just going to create our little pleats. So once everything's pinned down, you'll see that the top of your dress is now ruched as well. So then you can go ahead, sew your trim directly onto that top part of your dress. Just make sure that you're trying to sew as close as you can to the bottom of that trim, just to make sure it catches like all the edges and it just kind of looks nicer like that. And once that's done, we have a nice, beautiful, clean front trim with our little pleats. So now with our remaining pieces of trim, we're going to attach them to the rest of the dress. This trim is actually going to end up being a little bit longer because of course it is going to end up turning into the strap. Off camera, I did actually end up folding over the edges, pretty much exactly how I did it for our tubes earlier, just to create that clean edge. But you're going to start on the side that has the zipper, and you're just going to go ahead, once again, sandwiching all of your fabric into place as you go. No pleats this time. So as you can see, everything's starting to come together, so I can go ahead and start sewing. So we're gonna go ahead and sew exactly the same way that we sewed our other trim piece. The only difference is once we get to the end where the trim is no longer attached to the dress, we are just gonna continue that stitch onto the strap just to hold it in place. So the strap will basically just be sewn to itself at that point. So of course, repeat that to the other side and you're gonna have this really nice, clean trim that transitions into the strap. So all we have to do is sew that back piece of the strap onto the back of the dress. Once again, I just encourage you guys to try the dress on at this point and figure out, you know, how long you want that strap to be and where on the back you want to place it. For me, I ended up placing it like pretty much exactly on where the pleat was, and that seemed like a good spot, but you can kind of put it wherever you want. So once you figured out where you want to place it, all you have to do is just place that end of that strap into the inside of the dress and literally just sew it on. And then finally, the last thing that we're gonna do is hem the dress. Once again, try it on, see exactly where you want it to end. And then wherever you want it to end, I would just leave an extra 2 inches because we do want to end up doing kind of like a rolling hem. So for that, all you're gonna do is take the end of your dress, and then I just went ahead and marked where the 1 inch point was and the 2 inch point was. Once you have those points marked, you can basically fold your fabric on the 1 inch point and then once again onto the 2 inch point. And once that's sewed down, you have a nice clean hem that is not going to unravel because all the edges are tucked in. And then guys, after all of that, the dress is finally done. So guys, this is the dress. I'm very, very happy with how it turned out, honestly. I'm very proud of this because it did take me quite a bit of time. And I'm so glad that I stuck with like the original design exactly, because I just think it's so funny. It's like pretty much an exact replica of this dress. I'm so happy with the zipper too. Like I've done zippers a few times, but I don't know, I feel like people always make them seem like they're so hard, but honestly it really wasn't hard at all. But yeah, I think all the details turned out so good, and like I definitely was debating on like not doing this whole trim thing and just like creating my own straps and like just folding it over, doing like a normal hem. But I'm so glad I actually went through with it because I think it looks so professional. Like you wouldn't even be able to tell this is handmade, I don't think. I'm also so glad I chose this fabric because I feel like it just works so well with the silhouette and everything of this dress. And I know it is end of summer, but I feel like you could totally style this for fall with like some tights and boots and like a turtleneck or something, or even just a t-shirt. Like I think that would look super, super cute. So I feel like it's not too late to create this dress this year if you want to. But yeah guys, if anyone ends up creating this dress, please, please, please tag me or DM me on Instagram at Alicia Thrifts, because I'd absolutely love to see how it turned out for you guys. For my DIY wrap crop video, a couple people DM'd me with their creations, and like that was just so, so cool to see your guys' versions of it. But anyways guys, thank you so much for watching. Let me know if you want more sewing videos in the future, and I will see you soon.